Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan. I am your host, Mindy. A friend of mine told me in early 2018 that she saw a vision of me with a microphone in front of me. I laughed at the time and said, "I don't see any microphones in my future." Less than a year later, I was recording my first podcast on this show. I'm not going to say, "I hope you enjoy this podcast." My podcast is not truly meant to be enjoyed. Real grief, real healing is just that, real and raw. I provide you an opportunity to learn and share in the grief others are experiencing, and then we share how they are healing or perhaps not. Grief changes each of us in some way. Many of my guests have been encouraged to open new businesses, start foundations, and in general, work to make the world around us a better place. Grief is universal. How we decide to move onward, seeking healing, is individual. A significant part of my healing comes through the courageous kindness actions of others. As you listen to my podcasts, you will hear how you can give and receive courageous kindness too. Together, we are better.
Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan, taking a deep dive into the reality of the difficulty grief brings and offering insight into the healing available to each of us. Today, episode 32, Saving Lives is Ali Kemp's Legacy. And now your host, Mindy Corporan.
Hi friends, this is Mindy Corporan. Thank you for joining me on Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan. Today, I'm with a guest who I'm going to call my friend. He came to find me only months after I lost my dad and son to a murder in April of 2014. He came to me by way of some other friends. I think I had 2 or 3 different connections to my guest. And I remember a conversation in my office at the time. I was still working at Boyer Corporate Wealth Management. And this very tall, handsome gentleman walked in my office and he said, "I'm Roger Kemp," with this startling, deep voice that you'll hear in just a minute. And we sat down to talk about grief. And he has a lot to share about grief. He experienced grief years before I did. I want to share with you just one anecdote that I remember very specifically from Roger. He said to me, "People will tell you that your marriage won't survive." He said, "People will tell you that only 50% of marriages and maybe less survive after you lose a child." He said, "Don't listen to that. Hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your family, and hold on to your marriage." And I thank you very much, Roger Kemp, for that immediate advice that has stuck with me. And so far it is working very well, and I appreciate that. So my guest today is Roger Kemp, and I know that he probably proudly knows and is introduced as the father of Ali Kemp, and he can also tell us about his 2 boys as well. Roger Kemp worked tirelessly to bring his daughter's murderer to justice. During his struggle, he created a billboard campaign with the help of Lamar Advertising, which focused on his daughter's murderer with tremendous success. We're going to talk about that billboard campaign and whatever else Roger wants to talk about. We're going to talk about the Ali Kemp Educational Foundation, and we're going to talk about how Roger and his wife and his 2 other children and his foundation are helping young women in their lives, and they're making a difference. So thank you, Roger Kemp, for joining me today.
Oh, Mindy, thank you very much for having me on, and it's great to see you. And if you don't mind me saying, I think maybe we can reach out and help some people today. But I'll speak for myself. But it's tough to maybe go over some of these things. But I think I always look at this. If it can help one person out there, I will do it. And we're going to help a lot more people in that. And unfortunately, tragedies happen. I don't rank tragedies, but tragedies do happen in the world. But the most unthinkable ones are when there's a predator that decides to take matter into his own hands and take a life. And that's unthinkable, and we have to put a stop to that.
Yes, we do have to put a stop to that. And you are valiantly doing that. I mean, I know that you will continue to do that for Ali and for other women or people, young, men who are, stalked in some way, that you are making these huge efforts through the Ali Kemp Educational Foundation. Roger, I'm going to take you back to June 18th of 2002. And I just want you to give us that brief summary that I know you've trained yourself to do for the sake of helping people grasp the enormity of what happened. But I also want to hear from you the beauty that Ali put into your life. Who is Ali Kemp?
Well, now you're speaking to a dad here, so you be careful, where we go with that one. But I'll start with Ali, and she was her first child, and first children are very special, of course. And anyway, she just morphed into this beautiful young girl that went to Blue Valley North High School. Graduated from there. To give you a little bit of idea of Ali, and the back of the yearbook, they list the activities. Ali was involved in 19 activities at Blue Valley North High School. Student ambassador to meet people. She played sports, and she was on the honor roll. She didn't miss any parties. She just had it all going for her, and she went to Kansas State University. And as a freshman, she was on the Panhellenic Council with the president, which was almost unheard of. And then she had opportunities her freshman year to go to, with the State Department, to Communist China, Australia, and France. She was one of 80 students nationwide, Ivy League colleges, Division II, invited by the State Department to go to these countries. She was invited to go work with young people in Russia by a church. And this church she didn't even belong to, we don't belong to. And she was invited by them to go to Russia. So she had it all going for her. She was home in the summer, and she was working at the local neighborhood swimming pool after her freshman year. She Pi Beta Phi. I wanted to mention them. Great sorority. And she was working in the local neighborhood swimming pool. And her brothers were working there also. It was June 18th, if you say. It was a rather coolish day, probably around 70, partly cloudy. I always got home from work around 6:30, but I'd had some car work done, and they'd given me a, quote, rental car, which was this ugliest little thing I ever saw in 2002. I didn't mention the model year, did I? And they called. I said, "What is that thing?" And they said, "It's a sports car." So I thought it was so funny that I went home early that day, and I got home about 5:20, 5:25, and Kathy, my wife, and Allie's mother, was on the phone with Tyler, who had gone down to relieve her at 5 o'clock. And I could tell, said, "I can't find Allie. Her car's here, her purse is here, the phone's out. I can't find her." And I said, "That doesn't sound right." I turned right around on my heels and walked out the door. The swimming pool's about 3 blocks away. I got down there, do what you do. I looked in the bottom of the swimming pool, heavily shrubbed around the pool, looked behind the shrubbery, looked all around the grounds, and I couldn't find her. I went into the pump house and didn't see anything. Had never been in there before, and I almost left, and then I walked to the back of the pump house and turned around, and then I saw leg sticking out from underneath the tarp, and threw the tarp off, and it was Allie. I saw that she'd been beaten, battered, strangled. And it was very bad. And there was blood everywhere. And she could have died from any one of them, was my observation. I yelled for Tyler to call 911. And anyway, Ali was gone. We couldn't bring her back. And so that started our quest to find a murder. And, we were living in a wonderful world, American dream, and it all crashed that day. So,
Roger, thank you. I know it's still hard to talk about that, and it always will be. It will always be difficult. I also hope that in your heart, I know I feel in my heart when I speak of all the great things that my son Reet was doing, when I heard you talking of all the wonderful things that Ali was doing, it warms my heart and it gives me joy knowing what he was doing. It also gives me sadness, which I know it probably gives you sadness, that she was this bright, shining light and she was snuffed out without any consideration by a monster. You went on a hunt for that monster. Can you tell us about how you came to find him using the billboards in the United States?
yes. And so you have to make decisions when you lose a loved one. And you can either go to bed and pull the covers over your head and say that's it, or you can get up every morning and go fight the battle. And I was determined to find this predator that had come into my home, our home, and taken one of our children. And so I worked closely with the police, and I may use the word we, and I hope you understand how I use the word we, because when we met initially, we both made a determination we were going to work with each other. And they called out the task force, of course, which was FBI, all the local law enforcement agencies, and they were all at the house. So the police shared with me from early on what was going on, who we were looking at, what was going, and I made a determination, what can I do to help these guys, because the police were out there. They were putting their lives on the line trying to find this murderer, who I consider extremely dangerous. And what could I do to help them? And so I did several things. Some I did, and this is years later, so I can tell you some of the things I did, and I did them, and they say, well, gee, I wish you wouldn't have done that. And I'd tell them after the fact, but I understand. And so, but I'd go out every night and I was looking for that brown pickup. And we had a description of what it was. I knew it was very detailed, knew exactly what it was. The wheels, there had been some people there at the pool that knew those model of pickups, and that's where we had our description from. So I went out every night with my wife's blessing, and I looked for that pickup. And she just said, be careful on the way I go, because I was going to find this guy. And I ran 2 ads in USA Today, thinking, okay, it works for someone. What do we do? Looked at putting billboards basically on trailer trucks, figured out how to do it, which is a lot more complicated than you might think. And this came from the truckers, which are the eyes on the road, the soul of America, in my opinion. And they see everything that happens out there. And what the truckers had done initially is they faxed off pictures of the person of interest and this pickup we were looking for. And truckers took from here. If they went to Denver, they'd drop off a stack. And then they asked other truckers to take them on from there. So there was a lot of moving parts in this and what we could do. And one morning, I was driving to the cemetery and I passed a billboard. And I just looked up at that billboard and I thought, well, why not? Why not try that? And so I called the billboard company, and I kept asking, well, how much is a billboard? And they wouldn't tell me. And how much is a billboard? And what do you want it for? Well, I just want to know how much it is. And so pretty soon the lady said, Leanne said, well, are you Mr. Kemp? And I still don't know how she figured that out. But I said, well, yes. And she said, well, just a minute. And she went in and talked to a gentleman who ended up being Bob Fessler, Lamar Advertising. But obviously I didn't know anyone. And she said, we'll put it up for you. And I said, you put it up and you buy the vinyl. And I said, well, how much is the vinyl? And this is before digital. And she said, well, I'll find out. And then they came back, well, we'll do the vinyl for you too. So they did that and put it up, and it's just tremendous. And so we thought, I had such tremendous support, Mindy, from all churches, denominations, you name it, across the city, prayer groups and everything, and tremendous support from the inner city. And so I decided that I'd like to work with, there's a Move Up organization at that time in the inner city. And so worked with them and Mr. Alvin Brooks. And I said, who do you want to catch? And they said, we want to catch murderers. So we put up the first billboard. We caught that person very quickly. And we put up the second one. So long story short, we did about 13 billboards in 3 months, and we caught 11 people that we were looking for out of 13. So we knew billboards worked because you go by and you see your picture on a billboard, or a lot of times families say, you got to turn yourself in. But if you saw yourself and you go to the convenience store, now you feel like everybody's looking at you. So people turn themselves in. And we had one guy drive up from Oklahoma City, turn himself in, and it just really worked. So we got leads like that, and I did everything I could do to generate leads for the police. And we had the most leads in the history of Kansas City looking for Ali's murder.
So this billboard process and these leads, these were happening while you were still looking for Ali's murderer.
Yes, and I should mention that it worked so well that Mr. Fessler and I went to the National Outdoor Billboard Association in Washington, D.C., told them what we were doing, and it was Lamar Advertising that started this outdoor billboard, but other billboard companies also bought into it and did it across the country. If a local law enforcement, Crime Stoppers would call and say, we'd like for you to put up this person of interest, they do it at no charge. So we did this was a nationwide effort, and we caught a lot of murderers, a lot of predators.
Thank you for that. Thank you for taking your grief and your pain and helping other people before you even found her murderer. And so he was found, but he was found in a different state. Was he found by a billboard in that state?
That came through a different avenue in that he was a person of interest to us, Mindy, and the detectives went and met with an attorney in Kansas City, Kansas, and the attorney wouldn't allow us to take the DNA. And when we circled back to that attorney because we had DNA, circled back to that attorney, and we were looking at so many other leads, and the attorney said, I don't care what you do, and, and by the way, here's his real name. He was going under an alias, and the attorney had told us none of this. And through that, we had some misleading direction by various acquaintances of his, I will say it that way, about going to Texas. He went this way, he went that way. The U.S. Postal Service was involved and was checking mail, and one of these people made a mistake and sent the real name on an envelope to a state which was where he was located. And the detectives, the chief of police called me and said, Roger, and I'd had calls like this before, and I learned not to get too high, too excited, because when you find out it isn't the person, and as you know through the news, we had one or two that they said, I'll confess to anything, but I didn't murder Ali Kemp. I mean, we caught some really bad people. But so they went, I was called and said, we're sending three detectives to Massachusetts. And when they said three and all that, I thought this must be the guy. And anyway, it was, and it was. It didn't turn into an altercation, but it very easily could have. But he was able to come in, and we caught him there. He confessed to everyone in the world after he was caught that I did it, including people on the plane and everything else. And then we get him back to trial, of course, and that wasn't him, and I didn't do it. But so.
You turned every stone. You turned every stone. You looked under every bale of hay. You did everything that you could do. And I know so many parents would do that. Parents, you would typically think, would do that. And you did that and showed people what your efforts were about. And it should be commended. And it was commended, very high profile. It was a very high profile commendation when President Obama awarded you with that Citizens Award. Can you tell us? I love that makes you smile. I love that. I love that because I know when people say to me, Mindy, you're making a difference and you're making a ripple. I'm doing it because Dad and Reet were murdered, and I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish people didn't have to say to me, I'm kind and I make a ripple and all of that. But it's my reality. And your reality is Ali was murdered and you are making a difference in people's lives. And so I want to read, this is from your website about what President Obama said about you and other citizens that were standing there, these 13 different individuals. He said, citizens from all walks of life submitted nearly 6,000 nominations online, and it took us 4 months to select the winners. In the end, these 13 individuals were chosen not just for the work they do, but for the example that they set. And that's what you continue to do. Tell us a little bit about just that day with President Obama and the other 12 individuals who received that same award.
Well, it was a great honor. And if you don't mind, I'll back up just a little bit on it because I didn't know anything about it. I was nominated by the two senators in the state of Kansas. I mean, I find this out later. I know nothing about this. Republican senators, and I was nominated to the White House. Of course, President Obama's a Democrat. And I thought, well, this is a great honor to be nominated, and that's the end of that. And so it continued on, and I was called by Valerie Jarrett at the White House, and I talked to her. But when you talk to someone at the White House, I learned, I'm not talking to just Valerie Jarrett. You're talking to a room full of people. So I talked to her room full. She called me back, and then the IRS checks me out. The FBI checks me out. The Department of Justice checks me out. And so you can't be seen with the president, evidently, if you got something, because it always causes a big to-do about it and makes the president look bad. So I was checked out and all that, and it continued on. And then I was, this is a government for you, I was told I was a finalist. And when I was called and told I was a finalist, they said, but you can't tell anybody. Well, so I thought, well, this is the government. I can't tell anybody. And I thought, well, what happens if I tell somebody? Am I disqualified or what? So don't know. But then they called and not nominated, a recipient of the Presidential Citizens Medal. and fly back to Washington, D.C. So they flew my wife and I back, and Jill and Bob Liker, who I'm sure we'll talk about later, came back, and our 2 sons. And we go back to the White House, and it happened to be the day that we don't know what's going on, but the whole thing is delayed as far as the ceremony. So I was able to wander all over the White House, except the upstairs was just totally off limits. Went by the Oval Office, and everybody looked at me, and I looked at them, and wandered around, and there were guards on all the doors, and I didn't think they could talk, but they thanked me for what I'd done, and I backed up and looked at them with all their medals and everything, and I said, "No, thank you for everything you've done." So I met those guys, and then my wife Kathy and Likers and her sons came, and so we were still waiting, and these guards were standing guard on all these doors, and so I walk up, and they, someone in our group would say, "I'd like to see in there." So I said, "Well, come with me." I'd go over and I'd say hi to the guards, and we'd like to go in. So they'd open the door for us, and everybody's saying, "How'd you do that?" Well, I talked to everybody earlier, and you go in and look at this, and there's George Washington's sword and Andrew Jackson's this, and all it. It's just fascinating. And then we're sitting there, and I happen to be sitting when the ceremony starts. I'm sitting behind President Obama, and my wife's sitting right in front on the aisle. And he came in. He did a pivot on her shoulder and jumped on stage. And of course, women don't like to be touched from behind. And it's like she looked up at me, and then I really like to have that picture. Her mouth drops open, and it was President Obama. And so anyway, just extraordinary people that did things that you don't think about them doing. And I have the utmost respect for them. But there were so many that had done so much. And it was just a great honor to be considered with them for what they'd done. And then I will say, Mindy, I this was quite a day. And I would put this, I mentioned the people in the inner city in Kansas City. When we caught that first murder off the billboards, they invited my wife and I, and we went down and we had a barbecue, met all the people, brought out the marching band, and I had something off a computer that was printed out for me. And that means as much to me as the Presidential Citizens Medal. I mean, it was very special. So I don't do this for accolades or anything like that. It is nice to be acknowledged, but that's not the purpose of why I do what I do. And I can speak for you, knowing you, that's not why you do it either.
Right.
Thanks for asking.
You are welcome. So Roger Kemp, congratulations that you were honored with the Presidential Citizens Medal in 2011, and deservedly so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So yes, let's talk about Jill and Bob Liker. I've not met Bob Liker, but I have met Jill on numerous occasions, and she oversees the Ali Kemp Educational Foundation, which created then the Take Defense coursework. And our organization, Faith Always Wins Foundation and 7 Days, Make a Ripple, Change the World, have partnered with you on several occasions also, and we've hosted these classes and these courses. Tell our listeners how you came to create specifically the Take Defense coursework.
Well, 2 weeks after we lost Ali to this murder, her life was taken. My wife and I, we wanted to do a self-defense class for girls and never have this happen to another little girl out there again in our society. And we envisioned it to be middle school through college, my wife and I. And we didn't know how to do it, obviously, but we're surrounded by wonderful people. And we let it be known what we wanted to do. And one of our friends and a man has daughter was good friends of Ali, approached Michael Metters at Johnson County Park and Recreation, told him what we wanted to do. And so Michael gave his approval, and we met with all the Parks and Rec people, all the women, it was to be all women at that time, and so we could teach this class. And so we had about 30 women from the various agencies, Parks and Rec, to figure out, and we had a moderator, what do we want to do, what do we want to teach? And we had meetings on this and how to come up with a class, how to do it right. And Jill Liker, Johnson County Park and Rec, walked up to me and she said, "You don't know what I do you?" And I said, "No, never met Jill before." And she said, "I can do this." And she put it together, and we took off from there and wrote up the books, ABC, boundary setting, how to do it. We had our first class in the basement of Leawood City Hall. We had 12 people there. And forgive me a little bit, but I get a bang out of it because now, years later, it's kind of like Woodstock. If people out there are old enough to know, there were, who knows how many were at Woodstock because there was mud and no one could count. But if there was 500,000 people there, there was 2 million said I was there. So in the basement of Leawood City Hall, I would have now a few hundred people said I was in that first class in the basement of the Leawood City Hall when we had 12, and I basically
people vying to say that they were at the first Ali Kemp Educational Foundation Take Defense class. I was there.
So anyway, we've had 68,000 live, and now with the virtual, we're probably approaching 69,000 that have gone through our classes, and we have saved lives. The stories are just as horrendous, unbelievable as you think they might be on people who come up. It's very humbling. Just someone say your class saved my life, and the stories are just unbelievable, and how they got out of it and used their training, and hopefully lots of people use training and never got in a situation where it saved their life. But actual hands-on, we know we saved a lot of people, and it's really something. And we started out doing this, Mindy, my wife and I, and our goal was, if we saved one life out there, one, it was worth it. I don't care. If we did 100,000 people and saved one life, it would be worth it. You cannot put a value on someone's life. And when someone takes it upon themselves, hands-on, there's nothing more personal than taking a life. It's just, we can't allow that.
I agree with you. And I want to give you just a very brief story on how your defense class and some of the comments that Jill teaches, some of the comments I heard her teach when I took the class over a 2-year period. I took it twice through the 7 days program. She was clear that if I felt like someone was in my space, and if I felt that tingling, if I felt that intuition, to not ignore it, to turn around and look at them and let them know with my stare that they were not allowed to be in my space. And that was news to me. That was a new way to act about that. Before that, I would have just allowed someone to be in my space and then tried to get, out of the situation, just, going through a grocery line or it usually happens when I'm in line somewhere. And I've used that. I have used that when I feel that tingly feeling in my back. I turn and look at whoever is there and I give them that stare. And I am prepared to say no as loudly as I need to, which is what Jill taught. I want all of our listeners to know that you are still offering classes, correct? You said virtually. And I would think that now you're probably coming back to in-person. Are you now doing in-person classes again?
We are back to doing in-person. Yes,
great.
Absolutely.
They're extremely valuable. Are they available in some fashion all over the country? Where are they available?
Yes. Well, we're getting started back up in person here. Now we have gone and we'll be going again uh, to the coast, north, south. We go all over the United States. And our classes are free. But if, they may ask for donations, you can't make a donation, please come. But it does cost us money to do these classes, and we're not funded like big not-for-profits. We just don't get that money. So we're basically what we bring in is what we use for the training, and that's where we are.
Yeah, so let me say on behalf of Roger and the Ali Kemp Educational Foundation that if you as a listener are feeling like you want to donate to help them continue this effort, please do so. And the website will be in the show notes. Do you have a fundraiser planned? Do you have any kind of event specifically planned? Or do you just have monthly donors? Or how do you typically get funding for the classes?
Well, we get funding when people come to our classes, and some people make more than the donation, and that helps us greatly. We only have one fundraiser, Mindy, and that's our golf tournament, which we do every year in the fall. And I I didn't know it, but we're on 17th, 18th year now, and thank goodness someone is one of those deals. And I was told the other day, most golf tournaments for charities or whatever don't last past 10 years. And it's like, well, I'm glad I didn't know that. I would have been a nervous wreck probably. But we're continuing on. We've got, we keep the same great sponsors. I just can't say enough about the people that come out. We try to make it an enjoyable event. I can't say the first few years were, because it was like going to a whatever. Everyone was so solemn, and they were down about the alley and about the event. And now it's picked up, and people come, and uh, more like what a golf tournament should be instead of a very solemn event. And like I say, we have the same people, and it's very enjoyable. We've got great sponsors. We eat food all day, and I just when you have the same people coming back, it's just wonderful that people come out and support us like this.
That's good. The human connection. A horrible tragedy that her life was taken, and that human contact happened, and now. And all the years and all the effort, I'm not going to say, and now this, because you and Kathy and your boys and the Likers and so many other people, it's a huge effort to go on as long as you have. But I know that it fills your heart and it fills your spirit. And I know that
Yes.
You get up every single day for Ali and her legacy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned the Likers again, and I'd like to say something about them for doing these classes and putting them on. They're basically the ones that have trained 69,000 people. I mean, it's unbelievable. And Jill's background is in karate. She was two-time Karate Woman of the Year before. No one has ever been two-time Karate Woman of the Year before. But her husband was six-time world champion, and this is fighting, if you will. That's not the right word for it in karate, but that's what I call it. And this is not kid stuff. And so they know how to train you. But I also say when we go to our classes, and we go into the boundary setting and look at the situations you're talking about. But we get into, if the unthinkable happens and you're attacked, this is what you do. We're not teaching karate. So I don't want people to think that, but they're taking the knowledge that they have so we can take it right down to the basics and teach you what to do, get out of that situation, run away and go home tonight. We're not interested in trying to beat up somebody. We want you out of the situation. We want you safe. And that's what we're all about. So it's very important to us.
It is. It is very important to you. And I can attest, I've taken at least 2 classes personally, and then I think I attended 1 class, and I probably need a refresher. I think that women and young girls should take the class on more than one occasion to get the practice that we need to defend ourselves. Roger, I know that you do this in memory of Ali, and I know that it shines her light upon everyone. I know you would give all of this away to have your daughter back. I know that too. But I thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing what you're sharing and for healing the way that you are healing. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me on. Thanks, Mindy.
Friends, thanks so much for joining me today for this podcast of Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan. If you want to dive deeper into how you might heal yourself or a friend, please pick up a copy of my book, Healing a Shattered Soul. Published on May 3rd, 2021, you can find my memoir anywhere books are sold. You will also find me in social media channels as Mindy Corporan. Take time to help yourself heal, accepting courageous kindness. Take time to heal another by giving courageous kindness. Together, we are better.
Real Grief, Real Healing is copyright 2021 to 2022, Mindy Corporan, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. This podcast is a production of 818 Studios.